before NASA leader Raila Odinga made his address in Washington, D.C., his co-principal Musalia Mudavadi spoke exclusively to KTN's Duncan Khaemba, outlining NASA resistance agenda. Musalia Mudavadi says many independent institutions have been compromised and muzzled, making it impossible to have free democratic processes. He reiterated that the call for an interim government must happen to allow room for dialogue.
And once the Kenyans have made up their mind and they want a certain change, they can petition for a referendum to facilitate those changes. And let me just say that Kenyans should take these issues seriously, because we have seen that in the so-called sham election of 26th, the voter turnout was below 30%. And out there, you had more than 70% of the registered voters staying away from the polls. So that should tell anybody who wants to be honest about the political situation in this country that they must take that 70% very, very seriously as well. Because faced with a referendum on some of these issues, Kenyans are going to make a very serious decision about a new order. They'll just heighten the tension. They'll prolong the political tension in this country, because the protests will continue. So they also have a role to play so that this political uncertainty is not prolonged. Surely we must create a system where the vote will count, where the vote will matter. We must create a system where our children and our children's children who choose to engage in politics will go there knowing that it's a fair game. If I lose, I have lost fairly. If I win, I have equally won fairly. What we are seeing through the IBC, the disgraced IBC, is a system that can only create the environment for bloodshed going forward. The IBC must be dismantled.
All right, and it's time now to have a panel discussion. And at this point, I want to hand over to my colleague. And this is Michelle Ngele, who's going to be taking over the show from here. Michelle, over to you.
Absolutely, Michael. Good job this morning. So I have a panel here in studio for more on this conversation, the political situation around the country, and of course the utterances by NASA leaders led by Raila Odinga. And in studio with me today is Honorable Geoffrey Odanga, who is the Member of Parliament from Matayo's constituency. I also have Maure Maoka, who is the Member of Parliament, Igembe North constituency. Many thanks for joining us in studio this morning, gentlemen. Let me begin with you, Honorable Geoffrey. Of course, a very uncertain time for the country politically, even as the Supreme Court deals with the petitions in court. But Raila Odinga has been causing quite a few waves from the beginning, calling for a 6-month interim government, to his speech in Washington yesterday. Before we get to the nitty-gritties, what did you make of that speech?
I think the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, being a seasoned politician and a leader in this country for many years, who has championed the rights of Kenyans and social justice and made us even enjoy the democratic space we are enjoying today, is not the leader that you can just wish away. His sentiments need to be taken very seriously. Having tried the presidential contest in this country 3-4 times, and about three of them having been robbed of him, we really need to take him very seriously. And considering the elections that were on the 8th of August and the fresh elections that were ordered by the court, looking at how the results came out and even looking at the turnout during the 26th of October, which elections Raila Odinga and our NASA coalition boycotted and urged our supporters not to turn out. If you consider that over 70% of Kenyans heeded that call and did not really turn up, only 30% or less turned down, We need to take him very seriously if this country has to move forward. So the sentiments that our leader made while in the US yesterday are quite in order, and we are in support.
Right. Honorable Maura, your thoughts on this, considering that Raila Odinga said this very election could tear Kenyans apart, and national unity now is what's on the agenda for both President Uhuru Kenyatta and other national leaders in the country?
I believe Kenya is not ready to be torn apart. Those are the plans of NASA and Raila, that they wish to create and foment trouble, to create an environment that feels that unless he gets his way, there is no Kenya.
Right.
And I
but he says he represents a larger chunk of the Kenyan population.
No, you cannot be able to measure the size of the chunk by saying you are representing Kenyans when it's nearly, let's say, 40%. In every election, even in the US where he was, the Republicans and Democrats controlled equally 50-50, nearly 50-50 chance of being elected or leading the country.
Right.
But in the Kenyan situation that my honorable friend says that Raila has participated in shaping the democratic space. It is true he has shaped it. But the fact that he has lost faith in that democratic process, it shows what has been built over the years does not hold water. That's according to the NASA. But according to the new constitution, that Raila, I know he played quite a major part, and the NASA, it talks about the process of an election producing leadership. Now they have gotten into this other theory that you have IBC has no credibility. There is hope that the turnout of the people who did not vote in October 26, those are the Raila supporters. That's a pure lie. Because in every by-election, look at the Kisii one, the MP was announced the winner with 17% of the vote registered in Kitutu Church. But the voter turnout was 31%. So what is the difference between these of the Kisii and the national tally?
Right, and let's put the numbers aside for a moment, because also in his speech, Raila Odinga mentions that exclusivity is the biggest problem in Kenyan politics today. Have we had politics of inclusivity, would you say, previously? Well, and does he have a point there?
What I wanted to state is, when he talks of exclusivity and inclusivity, that can be resolved by allowing democratic process to prevail. By trying to derail the democratic process, you are calling for something nobody can have control of. Quick, if you look at the story, they are talking about a repeat election or disbanding the IBC. First, the IBC added their story on the 26th of October when they did the repeat. So if you want to reconstitute, maybe not to do an election the way we know it, because we will have the results which were announced. The Supreme Court is in the process of validating or invalidating it. So that is where we should be hanging on.
Right.
When, for example, they had called for boycotts. Boycotts for what? Before it was boycotts for pressure on IBC to agree to their demands. Hii ingine ni ya nini?
Here's an important point there. Honorable Odanga,
Yes,
NASA has been speaking a lot about politics of exclusion. They want to bring in politics of inclusion. But is their move right now really the best move to unite the country? I mean, we're already speaking of secession, which is further dividing this country. We're speaking of having an interim government. How is this likely to solve the problem of exclusivity?
Looking at what we have been doing since the elections of 2013, you remember we even came up with the Okoa Kenya, and one of the key factors, one of the key issues that we were propounding that time was inclusivity in government. All governments, even in this country since independence, whenever they were being constituted, they were representative enough of the people of Kenya from across the board. It didn't matter if a region was in the opposition or was in government. Inclusivity is a very, very important aspect if we want to unite this country. We cannot talk of a country that we can unite when a section of the Kenyans have meat in their mouth and a section of it are salivating like they have said themselves. So for that matter, the idea that we include every Kenyan people, every Kenyan region in government has eluded the Jubilee government right from the start. We have not seen them making any deliberate efforts to change the situation. And for that matter, even the regions that are calling for secession have to be listened to.
Right.
Because this is not the first time it is happening in the world. It has happened in other parts of the world. The USSR, you saw it breaking up, and very many other areas. If that can only be the reason or can satisfy the people so that they are able to run their own affairs, we cannot have a country which is deeply divided. A section of the country is enjoying the resources. Another section of the country is just watching.
Right, but just looking at our presidential system, it only allows for one president. We have more than 40 communities across the country, but at the end of the day, we can only have one president. And many have said the very basis of a winner takes all has been the root cause of exclusivity in the country, because at the end of the day, the winner, who still commands a large chunk, then feel like they've lost out on everything.
The winner
Do we then need to start having a conversation on changing our presidential system?
Yes, the winner taking it all does not mean that he or she should not have people from other regions in his or her government. A winner should be a winner who has support even in the areas that are largely known to be opposed to him or her. And for that matter, he or she should be making serious appointments on equal basis in his or her government. That does not mean that you exclude certain areas to their detriment.
Right.
Yes.
All right.
And therefore, there is every need that conversation to take a serious position. And we have been demanding and asking for dialogue from as far back as 2014. And the Jubilee government refused to dialogue.
Right. And we need to discuss what this dialogue needs to be about right now. But Honorable
I think the problem we are facing is that in that convoluted story of dialogue, nobody has said what they are up to. And I will say it again, if you want to say that we want an interim government, for example, the government that we know in the Constitution talks of a 5-year term. You do election on the first Tuesday of the 5th year of August. Then thereafter, if you have the problem in between, you can have by-election. Then the issue of interim government, nobody knows how long it can last.
Right.
Supposing you are intending to have 2 months or 3 months or 1 year, and then it ends up being 20 years, what will you do? You can remember the crisis in Somalia when they were fomenting it in 1991. They thought after Sierra is gone, they will be okay in 6 months.
Right.
And maybe that's a problem of our new constitution. Because when we brought in these governors, the governors, we thought that they are going to develop the counties. Now they are collecting money. They are sharing it out. When my brother is talking about exclusion, he does not say that in the national budget, a big chunk of it is going to the counties. If you go to Governor Nyanyanginyong or these Rasanga or Kingi or Joho, they have been collecting money for the last 5 years. Instead of the NASA team asking the governors that are running our show in our areas, are they delivering on the goods? Are people benefiting? Are they exclusive as well? Because if you go to Kisumu, you can't get Merus there. If you go to Meru, you can't have Luos there. So maneno yote, it is the confusion that was brought about by the new constitution. So maybe they want to ask for a referendum, we replace it with something that can make us more cohesive and more national. But if you want to look for the story of secession, that does not need dialogue. You cannot dialogue about how you should secede. You cannot dialogue on blackmail. You cannot dialogue on extortion. You cannot dialogue on the threats.
All right, all right. So we'll continue this conversation in just a moment, because one of the things Raila Odinga also mentioned, still on exclusivity, is that all 4 of Kenya's presidents since independence have been from 2 communities, and the other one preparing to take over, according to him, is not from a different community either. So again, raising questions as to our presidential system in the country. But I want to take a short break now. It is 4 minutes to the top of the hour. You're watching News Center on KTN News with me, Michelle Ngele. Take a short commercial break. Do stay with us. The conversation continues in